As we get ready to move into the Thanksgiving holiday, what I wanted to do is to kind of set up a project for us that we're going to work on over the next couple of days, and hopefully you'll be able to do the shooting over the holiday. And I don't want this to be a huge burden, but it's an opportunity. And so, we've been doing a lot of work, and we've only, in a lot of cases, been able to take portraits of ourselves. And it's hard sometimes to get other people to model for us or to be available to help, those sort of things. And so I wanted to be able to take advantage of that time when maybe you might be around a few other people. I mean, hopefully we're keeping our gatherings relatively small. COVID's still, worse than it's ever been. But, nonetheless, we probably, at least our immediate family, will be around a little bit more with some of these days off. So what we're going to be focusing on is what I'm going to call family portraits. Now, this could be not necessarily family, could be friends, could be, people that you spend time with, but it's an opportunity for us to think about those people that are closest to us. And so tomorrow we're going to do some planning for the actual shoot. But what I wanted to do today is to really start to look at this genre of family photography. Now, we're going to start by looking at some artists, some fine artists that have photographed their own families. But then later in the presentation afterwards, we're going to be doing a document that's going to actually look at kind of current photographers that are doing it, just not necessarily famous photographers, but working photographers, because one of the easiest things to start to make money at is photographing families and new kids when they're born, and as the kids are growing up, they want to get their portraits of the whole family, and so they need professionals to do that. Just like weddings and senior portraits and quinceañeras and those sort of things. Those are places where a photographer can get a start. Not trying to go out and do a whole advertising campaign or get a job at the at the newspaper or something like that. This is usually an easy way to kind of get a start in making money with your camera. So we'll look at kind of both of those aspects today, and then tomorrow we'll do some planning about what you're going to do for your shoot. So hopefully that helps you kind of understand where we're heading towards, because we've got a lot of techniques that we've been learning and using, and so we want to be able to reapply them and show that we've grown, that we're getting better, that we're using these things, that we don't just learn them one time and then forget them. So that's kind of the plan. So let's go ahead and jump into our slideshow for today. So let's go ahead and jump into our presentation. So again, we're talking about family portraits, and the first person we're going to look at is this guy named Harry Callahan. And now Harry Callahan, he's a great photographer. I mean, as far as like the idea of the way that he approached photography, it was really just like a part of his life. Like he had this goal of like shooting a roll of film a day. So he's pretty much like every day he would shoot something. And, he lived in Chicago. He taught at the Chicago Art Institute. And he, just like would keep a camera with him. And as he'd walk down the streets, he would take street photographs and he would document his life. And he was experimental and did lots of stuff with like multiple exposures and things like that really early on. And so, that family element was always kind of a part of it. He would use his wife, Eleanor, and his daughter, I don't remember her name, but he would photograph them, throughout their lives together. And so we'll look at a few of his family. So this is Eleanor, and it's just a pretty straightforward portrait. They live in Chicago, so it kind of has that feeling of the Windy City. We can see those big buildings in the background, and it feels like there's wind kind of whipping through there. Kind of maybe in the fall or something like that, with kind of that dark heavy jacket on, or heavy dress. And then here's another one. This is Eleanor and his daughter, and again they're almost like hiding in the landscape. It's kind of like graphic shapes, lots of light and dark lines, and then they're both kind of just standing in place for having their picture taken. And then this is another one, more of an intimate portrait of Eleanor, and he had these pictures that he would take too that were very similar to this, but they were like of nature. They would be like snowscapes with little like twigs and things like that, very high contrast. And so this portrait of her really has that high key values, right? Everything's super, super white, and there's just those little rims of black that kind of trace around there and create those shapes. And then these are a couple that are about multiple exposure. So he was really an experimental multiple exposure person. We see a lot of multiple exposures now, like on Instagram and things. And Harry Callahan was really like one of those first people to do that. He, like at least concertedly, and like played with it all the time. And he was doing this with his camera, so he had a button he could hold and keep the shutter from advancing. Or sometimes he would shoot a whole roll of film and then, put it back through the camera, and you just wouldn't know what you would get until you were developing it. So it looks like this kind of like some textures and pattern, maybe like of a wall, and then like the portrait of Eleanor. And then this one here, again, it's like it's tilted on its side too, so it kind of looks like tumbleweed, on one part, and then like, some grasses and things like that, and then the portrait of her kind of overlaid on top of that. And then those two images kind of come together. The black areas allow new exposure, and then the white areas, start to block up the exposure. So then the next photographer we're going to look at is a lady named Sally Mann. And so she's had a long career. She was a little bit newer. Her first book was something called Intimate Portraits, Immediate Family. And it was about probably right around when I was in Art Center, so like 95 or something like that. But she's continued to work all the way through. And her work was all 8x10, or bigger sometimes, camera, right? So really large negatives. And they were, she would set up, and her kids would just like, she documented their lives as they went through, as they grew up, and whatever they were doing, whether they were, we'll look at some of the images, you'll see. But they're these really beautiful portraits, and just the light and the quality of them. And they're a lot about like losing innocence and growing up and those sort of things. So this is Emmett back in the background. He's on stilts. This is a candy cigarette, but she's posing in a way that she looks so old, even though she's still so young, right? And there's a lot of that kind of comes along in the photographs. And this is little Jessie over here. And so, here's another one, again, trying to make herself seem older, very 80s in this case, or mid 80s with the Cabbage Patch dolls and those sort of things. Beautiful lighting, wild kind of hair. They were kind of fairly wild kids, usually in bare feet and those sort of things. Here they are playing on the porch deck, again, looks like she's got to go to the bathroom, and they're playing with bubbles, and just, as they were just living their life, Sally would just constantly be like working on photographing and just taking, but again, not snapshots. These are huge 8x10 pictures that she's taking. Here the girls are, again, trying to put on makeup and those sort of things, with this great old rusty Ford, or Chevy, sorry. And, all their stuff kind of strewn around, the dog coming in. And here they are playing, looks like it's Sorry or something like that, on the porch, during the summertime, just playing and hanging out. And again, this one's got this really beautiful, like almost like, there's a style called pictorialism, where it's really this soft depth of field that we can see back in the background. And as part of the lenses that she would use, that kind of had that effect, that kind of created that soft focus around the outsides. So this one, I think Emmett had gotten in a fight with a friend or something like that. And so again, they're just documenting, whatever happened. It looks like he's got a bloody nose and it's dripping down, and, this great stripes and the pattern of the, floral prints back there, and then, the two, it looks like they maybe have made up after whatever the tussle was. And those sort of things happen all the time. So Jessie's always got some sort of thing. She's the youngest, she's probably scrappiest, I think she's got, bruises and things like that are often in her, but she's got this inner kind of like wildness to her. And here's this one, again, almost, this really reminds me of an old Walker Evans photograph. And Sally Mann, often, would kind of mimic those sort of things. And she was well aware of some of those portraits from the Great Depression, and sometimes would dress the kids up a little bit, or maybe when they were extra, rough or dirty, kind of photograph them against these old weather barns and things. And then there's a couple of Jessie where she had gotten a black eye. So here, she's got a little shiner here, and then there's another one a little bit older. Again, another little shiner in there. And this one's really got this whimsical, the hair that's kind of flying through there, and the soft focus around there. So these are all really, just like these little pictures of like day-to-day life, and she's just documenting it and capturing it. And, we're in the quarantine, we were spending a lot of time with our family. And so, if you just start looking for these little details and these little things about each of the people in the family, it could be a great thing to kind of just keep an eye out for and start to document. They also spend a lot of time, I don't know if they're right on a lake or they're right next to a lake or river. And so, there's several photographs kind of around that. And in this case, it looks like the kids have dug out like a little dam, and Emmett's kind of laying back in there and fitting into that space. And then the reflection and everything, and everybody looking in, and kind of see this, again, that kind of blur effect on the outside edge of the frame. And then here's another one of him in the water, and again, this reflection and everything else, and he's looking straight at the camera. Again, just a really nice portrait of him. So then the next photographer we're going to look at is Bill Owens. Now, these aren't portraits of his family, but he in the 60s and 70s, he did this body of work, and a book came out, and it was known as, it was called Suburbia. And so what he was really interested in, and very much inspired by Robert Frank's work and the Americans, but he was looking at like this new suburbs, right? All of a sudden, people were moving out of the big cities or moving to the outskirts, and everybody had their, the tract home, and it was kind of that ideal of the 50s, right? That everybody had these little, perfect houses, and and so he went into those suburban areas and photographed them, and he would meet the people, and he would hang out and document. And so his work's all about kind of that suburban life. So it's things like this, just this is obviously a couple and a newborn baby, and he's invited in photographing, and they got this new modern kitchen and those sort of things. It's also interesting, like in this one, when you look back in here, they're like right up against like an electrical plant or something like that too. So it's kind of interesting. They're just like in this little suburban area, probably fake fruit and those sort of things. Here's a barbecue, right? What's more American than barbecue? So, here they are, and he's got his chef hat on and smiling. And, he was invited to all these block parties and those sort of things, and he would photograph the different people as he would meet them. Here's a big block party, probably like 4th of July or something. And we can really get a sense of that suburb area here, like, the little cul-de-sac. And a lot of us live in these sort of neighborhoods, right? A lot of us live in our developed communities, and so everybody's just having the little their little tables and blocks, and bikes, and playing and those sort of things. So here's one about the holiday. So I didn't come across any that were about Thanksgiving. I thought that I'd seen one, but I didn't come across it when I was looking. But it looks like they're getting ready for Christmas. So they've got like the little fake Christmas tree and a few other things, and the crushed velvet. So it's feels very 70s, and the plaid pants, and the beehive and everything else. Another thing that was really, the TV was relatively new, and color TVs were just coming out. So, a quick shot of, the kids that are just like, in their little living room and, watching their cartoons. And this one is I think it's a used car dealership or something. And, and he's got all these, mounted heads on the wall, which just is really kind of feels very strange. And he's got his polyester pants and shirt on, looking at the camera. And this was actually at Disneyland, so this is at the opening to that storybook, boat ride, or maybe it's Pinocchio. I don't remember, but I'm sure you've seen that entrance at Disneyland. And then this was one at Ronald McDonald, McDonald's, and had the tree, and she's looking right at the camera, kind of like, what are you taking a picture of? But really has a sense of like Americana at that time, So that's Bill Owens' work. So then the other thing that we're going to look at is like this genre that it became really popular in the last couple of years, or maybe in the last 10, where they found all these old photos in the 80s that were just awkward family photos. And I'm sure you've seen them in different places, but they are, something to look at. So I'm not going to talk a lot about each of these because I think they kind of speak for themselves. And there's not like a specific photographer or story about them, but if you wanted to, you could always like utilize juxtaposition or something like that, and take on some of these ideas. They weren't meant to be funny at the time. It's just when we look back, we're like, oh my gosh, what were they thinking? So there we go. What were they thinking? Like, how inappropriately awkward is that whole setup? And not even to mention that, but then they're full on denim, everything, and looks like he's getting ready to have the same haircut as him, and this one's got it shaved, and I don't know what's going on there. So here's a couple fun ones. This kind of reminds me of the Owen Mills and the matching outfits. I don't know when I grew up in the 70s, and so it was just something that parents did, the matching outfits, and grandma would make me and dad a matching shirt. Like, I don't know what it was about that. So here it looks like a family of karate. Looks like dad's already all the way up to a red belt, but the other ones are just getting started. That's quite a large family, and but that is something else, right? And perfectly arranged from biggest to smallest, but why they all have to be showing us their butt with their hands in their pockets, I don't know, but they are. Here's a full-on 80s do. Oh man, so in high school, I went, in the late 80s was when I was in, freshman, in sophomore year. And there was this girl that had, we used to call it sundial, right? So she'd have it spray paint, spray canned, big old, sundial hairdo. And this little girl's got it perfect with the bangs. It's like, what is going on? And then, I don't get why the cutoff sleeved Ghostbusters, if that's one thing, but why put the collared shirt underneath it? Why not just wear the t-shirt? I don't know. In case you didn't know your role in the family, I suppose, right? You wouldn't want to confuse, son for dad, I guess. So here's the matching outfits. This would be something that my grandma would have made for us to all wear to our family portrait. And this feels so Owen Mills. I don't know if you ever had to go to Owen Mills, but they had these, painted backgrounds that were so horrible. Yep, it even says Owen Mills, yep, right there. I remember going and getting some pictures taken at Owen Mills at some point. Okay. Alrighty, that's sitting in the tree, I guess. And even worse, like, how did we get to that point that it's like, no, go ahead and hold on to the dog? That doesn't look inappropriate at all. So this will move us into some, animal ones for a couple of minutes. And the floating head, right? So the floating head was huge in the 80s. This double exposure effect, not nearly as artistic as the Harry Callahan ones, but they would take these double portraits, or they would, print them together. So we've got the cat and the cat family. And I think this one's probably more of a modern day, remake of the craziness. This is the 70s version of it. You can see those big collars, and so to me, it doesn't feel like it's a family unit. It feels like almost like a divorce picture. Dad didn't want to sit with it, and now they took them separately. We're going to include Dad. I'm sure that's not the case, but it sure feels that way. And I think this is a remade one, but it's completely awkward and inappropriate. And all right, so that's a great family photo. And why is Dad wearing shorts? Is he a priest? Maybe, but why I don't know, like, why the shorts when everybody else seems so formal? I don't know. And man, look at this high-tech family. They're so cutting edge with their huge cell phones. But at the time, it must have been as cutting edge as we could get. And then this one just seems, it almost, when I first saw it, I thought when it was small, I thought it was like a ventriloquism, but then it looks like it's just actually their kid, but they're just like hardcore goth. And I love that it's actually from Kmart, right? It's just Kmart Portrait Studio. They went in there. They feel so, washed out of color, and the kid's just bright and vibrant and, totally like, looks like Mr. Young Republican or something. And, I don't know. And then there's this one, which, you try so hard to get everybody together and everybody smiling. And of course, one of the babies is going to, break down, and he's just in full on cry. And, it's just those magical moments. You couldn't plan this, right? If you wanted to take this picture, there's no way you could get it. It's just one of those moments that just happen to be there and get captured. So I think that's all of them. Yeah. So what I want you guys to just really start to think about is, who are you going to be spending time with? Just start mulling it over now, because we'll do some planning tomorrow. But who do you think you're going to be seeing in the next couple of days, as we're at our Thanksgiving holiday? And try to think of like a concept or an idea or a way that you could honor the way that you love them, and the way that, or a way of just sharing some, being able to take those and capture those moments and share it with them, and, and having them for a lifetime. So think about that part. And then what we're going to do now is what I want you guys to do is on our Canvas page, there's a second page which has a Google Doc. And so I want you to go ahead and go into the Google Doc. And what it has is it's a page, it's a website page. It's got 55 current photographers. So these are like the best family photos of the last I think it was 2019 or something like that, so like a year or so ago. And what I want you to do is to look through there, and you're going to just kind of, just browse, get through all of them so you can see the whole breadth. And they all have slightly different approaches, right? But they're different versions. They're not just studio portraits anymore, right? people are on location and they're doing stuff in there. Some are conceptual, and some are, flying in the air, and some are just, everybody grouped together, or, there's a wide variety. So what I want you to do is pick 5 out of those 55 that you really like, that are just cool or different, or don't really feel like a family photo, but it's a great way to document, the family or those people. And then in those 5 on your doc, you're going to put the photo in one of those grid boxes. And then what I want you to do is to type a couple, that doesn't have to be a lot, but a few sentences, just about like 2 things. One would be, why do you like it? Right? What is it that stood out? Was it something about the concept, or the colors, or the way that it was shot, or that it was from above, or whatever it is? And then, so that would be the one thing. And then the other thing I want you to think is just kind of dissect the picture. So look at it, like what kind of composition are they using? What kind of lighting? Did they use a special camera technique? Does it have shallow depth of field, or stop action blur panning? Like, just break it down. Like, what is it about that picture that drew you to it? And what is it that is making it so captivating, right? Because there's something about it that drew you to that particular picture out of the 55. So, look at that and, dissect it, think about those parts, and then just, write that down so that we can use some of this information that we pull together today and apply it tomorrow as we're starting to think about our own shooting. Okay. So if you have any questions, you can send me an email. It may take me a little bit to get back to you. But otherwise, have a great day. Use your time wisely. Take this time now inside of class, get stuff done so that, when we get to tomorrow, you're prepared. So have a good day.